Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witnesses, and I too honor the Gold Star families who are here and appreciate them sitting through and having to relive some of this. I would point out that you've been mentioned about the 7,000 prisoners released. Part of the Doha agreement was to release 5,000 of those prisoners. Isn't that right, Colonel Krumich?
I would have to go back and look at the numbers, but
Well,
that was part of the Doha agreement. If
Yeah.
conditions were met and people were acting in good faith, that there would be steps taken.
Now, as I understand it, you were the chief of staff at Special Operations Command Central, starting what, back in 2019?
I was.
So while you were there, why you said over and over and over and over, we've heard this, there was no plan, no plan, no plan. Did you see any planning during the time you were there, starting in 2019, leading up to Doha?
But to be clear, US 4A had plans. Like on the military side, and this is something I want to make sure is really clear, the military has military plans, and they executed them with under great duress, and they executed very well. Both the acting of the withdrawal, which was key. I mean, they did that in an incredible timeline, and it's a testament to the planning and the execution, given the nature of the plan, and the actual NEO itself, to get 120,000 people out.
I appreciate that. I know how well
impressive.
our military performed and how many people were removed, but why then do you keep saying there's no plan, no plan, no plan?
No, I don't think I said that. I
Well,
said that
you
I said
didn't
that there was
disagree
a
when
plan.
somebody up here keeps saying it.
No, the plan that we put forth as the military recommended course of action was not chosen.
I see.
And a separate course of action was selected by the administration, which focused on the diplomatic footprint. Going back to my earlier testimony, there was 3 goals. The first was having the diplomatic.
I've got the testimony, I can read it. Talk about diplomatic solutions. This is a committee that looks at foreign affairs, not at military. That's a different committee. So I'd like to get back to some of the diplomacy. We've heard a lot about how the women and children left in Afghanistan, or women and girls, are being so mistreated. Isn't it true that during the negotiations for the Doha plan, there were no women at the table, no women in the room? Would that have made a difference in some of the decisions that were made? Doctor, could you comment on that? Dr. Kalinda?
I wasn't in the room at Doha. I know certainly on the Taliban side, there are no women present. I think on the American side, maybe there were. So that's all I can.
How about as part of the Afghan government, as Mr. Kim was saying, that they weren't in the room either, were they?
No, they were not in the room.
Okay. Well, another thing is reform that we've got to look at fixing this. We've got to look at how to make it better, not just keep going over and over and over again about how terrible it was. We acknowledge that. There were mistakes made. Our hearts go out to those families, but let's try to prevent it from happening again. Maybe one of the reforms that we could make and talk about is expanding that Afghan adjustment, I think, or Afghan Agreement Act, where we look at the number of visas that are provided to get families out. Can we expand that? Would that make a difference? Would that be helpful?
I was talking with Congresswoman. I was speaking with one of my former interpreters yesterday, who I helped get a special immigrant visa. And his family is still in Afghanistan. His parents, he's got siblings still in Afghanistan under threat. And it would be wonderful if immediate family members of our SIV holders could qualify as well.
Well, let's do something, let something come from this other than just a rehashing. I think that's something that the committee should look at. You also mentioned that in your written testimony, some of the solutions systemic solutions, the problem with the silos, nobody on the ground. Would you just lay out for us some of those other solutions so we can read it, but let's put it on the record.
Sure, Congresswoman. The first one I mentioned is we need a basic national security doctrine. The military would call it a doctrine or set of terms and concepts. So we're using, across agencies, we're using the same terms to mean the same things. I was in the White House Situation Room listening to people use the word defeat reconciliation, other terms, to mean completely different things, and that impeded communication undermined our ability to coordinate. The terms evacuation and withdrawal mean different things to different people. If we were speaking the same language within any administration across agencies, then we would have a much greater chance of improving communication and coordination, fewer things falling through the cracks. Second, or related to that, is we need to have a doctrine about war termination. The military doesn't have one. The State Department doesn't have one. State Department's got no expert body of knowledge on how to conduct wartime negotiations in which the United States is the active participant, and it has not worked out well every single time. So that expert body of knowledge is not difficult to create, and something that could be done fairly rapidly. The next reform is to actually put somebody in charge on the ground of our wars. So instead of right now all the silos, deploying by silos, so the lowest ranking person that anybody on the ground reports to, the senior leaders on the ground report to, the lowest ranking person they all report to is the President of the United States. I mean, you can't run a business that way. You certainly can't run a war that way. So we need a congressional equivalent of like a Goldwater-Nichols Act for the interagency, which gives the president the capability to appoint a senior civilian or military official to be in charge of our all U.S. efforts on the ground, and everybody reporting to that individual. And that person is then held accountable by the president for achieving U.S. aims, and can also appear before Congress for proper oversight and accountability. We're missing that today in this hearing. There's no one person Congress can point to and say, talk to us about this disastrous evacuation. And then the final point is we need a much better doctrine for how we build developing military institutions. The way we built the Afghan military was in our own image and likeness, because that's what we knew. But there are other models for militaries, and if we had a greater menu of options, and what sort of considerations would make one option more advantageous than another, we could have built an Afghan military that was much more self-reliant, much less dependent upon us. And quite frankly, I mean, I'm a consultant. I work with clients, and I've got an ethical obligation to make sure that when we part ways, which we will always do, that my clients are better off and they're able to soar to new heights on their own. What we did, creating such a dependent military, was malpractice.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Colonel.
much. Thank you.